Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. Today I have two homemade supplies to share with you. One of them is an embellishment, and then the second one is actually a pattern paper. So let's go ahead and start with that embellishment since that was the title of this video. In my last video, I built my scrapbook kit for this month, and I was inspired by the leaves in that chipboard set that I put in my kit. However, my kit has a much lighter color palette than that kit did, so I wanted to create my own leaves that match my color palette. And I'm going to start that process with ink. And I went to my ink swatches and I pulled out 4 inks, and I will link up any products that are still available below. The next step of this process is die cutting, and this die set is no longer available. If I can find an alternative, I will link it up for you below. I die cut the 4 separate leaves 4 times each to create enough layers to get that chipboard thickness. As you can see, I can use all 4 die cuts at the same time, and I was cutting 2 layers of cardstock at the same time, so this process doesn't take quite as long as it might look. Once all my pieces are done, I lay them out tidily and I pull out a silicone craft mat. You can use any mat underneath that you want because this next step is a little bit messy. I'm going to ink up these pieces. I like to do this with a brayer, but you could do it however you like, and you could even just die cut solid cardstock for this step if you wanted, but using ink allows me to really customize these pieces to the color palette that I'm interested in. And after this, I am sure to clean it very, very well in between colors so that I don't cross-contaminate my next color. When I got to the final color, it was still a little too saturated with the brayer method, so I used it more as a watercolor by wetting it down and then dipping my items in there, and that gave me the color tone that I wanted. Next up is just a process of gluing everything together, so I'm just doing a small sample here where I lay out one leaf with all its layers, glue the 3 layers, and then pick up each layer using that tacky quality of the glue, lining them up into place, giving them a pinch, and setting them aside to dry. And I will actually lay everything out and do this all at once so that this process goes faster. The final detail step of this is to add some foiling, and I'm going to do that with this tube of deco foil and my quickie glue pen. Like the name implies, it dries quickly and it dries tacky, which is going to allow this foil to stick. I pull out one sheet of the foil sheet, and I'm actually going to cut it apart because I don't need an entire sheet for this process. And you'll see in the end that really I only use one of these pieces that I cut apart because this actually doesn't add a ton of foiling to this process. Now this pen did need a little bit of priming because it's been sitting unused for a long time, but I love these pens because they can sit for a long time without drying out, and they allow you to draw fine details. And here I'm just drawing veins on these leaves, so I don't need any art skills to do that. Just draw some swipey lines and you're good to go. Once that is dry, you just kind of burnish the foil colorful side up onto that glue and it sticks, and you get some pretty foiling detail. And because not much foil is used in this process, you can just twist and turn this foil around to line it up and foil the next piece. And any parts that didn't come through, I just add a little bit more glue, set it aside to dry. That's important that it needs to be dry. And then go ahead and refoil it. And that's it for this one. Pretty easy, takes a little bit of time, but you can get customized, very pretty embellishments from supplies hopefully you already have at home. And if you don't have foil at home yet, I highly recommend it. It is a lot of fun to work with. Project number 2, I'm going to create my own pattern paper inspired by this small snippet of paper from the inspiration kit when I was building my scrapbooking kit for this month. And I believe that is a crepe paper product, but I cannot seem to track it down. So that is a very good reason to create your own. Now, I had a couple of ideas about how to go about this, and the first idea was to print out this text using a word processor. It's just the alphabet in a large font, as much as I could fit on the paper. And I know it's very, very hard to see here. Actually, I redo this a little later and you'll be able to see it better. But that is in a very light gray text. And I'm going to trace over that. But before we get to that, the other couple of ways I thought about doing this project. The first one was using an outline stamp set to stamp in an ink color and then use a matching marker to finish it off, or to use die cuts to trace around the letters, and then that way I would have a marker for tracing and for finishing and the colors would match. Moving forward with the idea of tracing this font, I went through my marker stash to pick markers that I think could work for this project. And I had a few colors in mind here, and most of them I didn't like. And in fact, the three that I ended up picking weren't perfect, but they were the closest, so I was going to go with it. And then I start tracing over that very light gray printed font, and you can start seeing this alphabet start taking shape. And I use the thick end, the brush end of the marker to do the thick outline of the letter. And then I'm using the fine point of the marker to do the little strings that will kind of crisscross inside of that letter. And as I was working, I had such a hard time seeing that font that everything was getting wibbly on me. So I did print it out again in a thicker, not a thicker, sorry, in a darker font so that I could see it better. And knowing that that font color would saturate my marker colors just a little bit, but it was better to do it that way than to get all wibbly. And it took me a little bit of time, but in the end, here is what my paper ended up looking like. Now, because this was printed, my printer has margins that it follows, and so I'm not getting an edge-to-edge piece. I did end up trimming off that extra margin, and so this piece ends up only being like 6.5 inches by 9 inches or so. And that would be a good reason to use one of the other methods I mentioned to create this piece so that you can get closer to a full-size sheet, even a 12 by 12 sheet, especially if you don't have a 12 by 12 printer. That does wrap it up for this time. I hope you got something useful out of this video and some ideas for your crafting. I will be back next time with a layout process video, and then the video after that should be creating some more embellishments. So I hope you will join me for those two videos. Until then, I hope you have an artful day.